Alright, so for this section, I couldn't find a good video on YouTube that covered everything I wanted them to talk about. Nobody's made a fun, cutesy little video for this particular topic, which is unfortunate because it's really important. So, sorry you don't get fun graphics or anything like that, but this is still a really important topic to cover, so made my own video for it. So this section is about how exercise, nutrition, and hormones affect bone tissue. I know it's easy to think of bone as something that's dead and non-living, but as you've learned by this point in the chapter, hopefully, bone is very much living as long as it's in our body, and so we need to maintain it. So exercise is the first thing we're going to talk about. So exercise causes stress on bones. So some of you that maybe work out frequently know that working out your muscles and stressing them is going to lead to some really small amounts of damage, but that's what actually helps your muscles grow and get stronger. The same principle applies to bones. So the act of stressing out your bones by doing some sort of activity is going to cause your bones to deposit those mineral salts and collagen fibers more readily and keep your bones really, really strong and durable. So if you're exercising regularly, you're more likely to have thicker bones than if you're sitting around a whole lot. So exercise can be jogging. That's going to cause a decent amount of mechanical stress on your bones. Resistance training, so weightlifting, even if it's body weight, stuff like that, is going to produce that stress on your bones that's really, really necessary to encourage that continued deposition of the mineral salts and collagen fibers to keep your bones strong and not so fragile. That way, as you get older, that will help prevent osteoporosis, which I will talk about here in just a couple slides. Another aspect that's really important is our nutrition. So there's some really important vitamins and minerals for bone maintenance. The obvious one is calcium, so that's necessary to make the calcium phosphate and calcium carbonate, to make those hydroxyapatite crystals, which gives bone its hardness and durability. So we have to have a good amount of calcium. In addition to that, calcium is really vital for our muscles functioning, so bones both need calcium to maintain themselves and to store it for muscle contractions. So calcium's really, really important. That's why growing up, most of us were probably told to make sure to drink lots of milk. And milk does have a decent amount of calcium in it, but other foods have plenty of calcium as well. Spinach actually is a great example of a food that is really high in calcium. You do have to eat a lot of spinach to get it, but it is really high in calcium, so don't feel like you have to drink milk. I can't, I'm lactose intolerant, so that makes it a little challenging, but all of the plant-based milks that I buy are fortified with calcium, so make sure you're keeping up on your calcium intake. Another one is vitamin D. Vitamin D and calcium really go hand in hand because without vitamin D, our body can't absorb and process calcium. So our bodies can't make calcium and they can't make vitamin D by themselves very well. So we really need vitamin D in order to maintain calcium. Vitamin D is largely obtained through sun exposure, actually, but we can also get it from our diet. So if you're somebody who doesn't spend a ton of time outside, it's not that big of a deal. It actually doesn't require that much sunlight in order for our bodies to make vitamin D, but you can very easily get it from your diet as well. Some other vitamins and minerals that are really important are vitamin K, so this helps support the mineralization of bones. This can work with vitamin D, so a synergistic effect means they work together to have a stronger end result. So vitamin D and vitamin K can work together to really help that calcium absorption and ultimately bone mineralization. So green leafy vegetables are probably the number one source of vitamin K. So if you like spinach, you get vitamin K and calcium, and I think a little bit of vitamin D actually in there as well. And then magnesium is a really important structural component of bone. Fluoride also, so fluoride helps keep our bones strong and the enamel in our teeth. So that's a really important trace nutrient that we need access to. And then omega-3 fatty acids. It's really important that 3 because omega-6 fatty acids aren't so good for us, but omega-3 fatty acids help reduce inflammation. And inflammation can interfere with that osteoblast function, so the creation of new bone cells and tissue. So this graphic just kind of shows how we get our vitamin D from the sunlight. So we're exposed to the sun, and our skin can actually manufacture vitamin D with sun exposure. We only need about 15 minutes or so of sun exposure a day to get our necessary vitamin D intake. But like I said, you can also get it through food, and it's absorbed in the small intestines, and the liver processes it and sends it out into the bloodstream. So you can see the kidneys also play a role in vitamin D availability. So you don't need to know all of those inner details of what vitamin D turns into in the calcium in the liver and kidneys. Just know that we can get vitamin D from either sun exposure or food, usually both, I think, for most people. And it is really important for our bone maintenance. Next important factor for bone maintenance is hormones. So we're going to talk a bit more about hormones in a few weeks when we go over the endocrine system, but there's some that we really need to pay attention to right now with bone maintenance. So growth hormone is produced in the pituitary gland, and it controls bone growth in a multiple type of ways. So it is going to trigger chondrocyte production, which is cartilage. So cartilage in the epiphyseal plates is going to increase the length of long bones. Growth hormone is also going to help increase calcium retention, which causes more mineralization and stimulates osteoblastic activity, which is going to improve our bone density. So growth hormones are really, really, really important. Thyroxine is the next one. So thyroxine is secreted by the thyroid gland, and this is going to also promote osteoblast activity, which is going to increase the synthesis of that bone matrix, so the production and maintenance of our bones again. But thyroxine specifically acts on osteoblasts. Sex hormones like estrogen and testosterone are also really important for bone maintenance. So these are also going to act on the osteoblasts and the ultimate production of that bone maintenance matrix. They're also responsible for growth spurts that occur during puberty. So a lot of people went through this or have seen their kids go through it. Is, you take summer vacation and come back and somebody's grown like 6 inches. So those sex hormones during puberty are very, very vital for bone maintenance and growth, because that is also going to act on the epiphyseal plates, which increases the length of bones. So these sex hormones are also going to ultimately promote converting that epiphyseal plate, which is cartilage-based, to the epiphyseal line, where it becomes calcified, transforms cartilage into bone. Because we're done growing, we don't need that epiphyseal plate functioning anymore, and it becomes the epiphyseal line. And so that's just a demarcation of where the two parts of bone have ultimately come together. This is actually used in things like forensic anthropology. So if somebody is trying to determine the age of a skeleton that's been found. One of the things that they can check on x-rays is whether or not there's an epiphyseal plate present or an epiphyseal line, and that can help narrow down the age range that a skeleton is, which can ultimately help in identifying who that person is. So if you're interested in forensics at all, that is something that you will most likely be learning about if that's the direction you end up going. Calcitrol is another hormone. This is going to be helpful in absorbing calcium. So calcitrol is actually the active form of vitamin D. So remember, our vitamin D gets processed in the liver and kidneys, and it becomes this calcitrol. So it is triggering that absorption of calcium and phosphate from our intestinal tract, where it's being absorbed from our diet. And so, again, we really need that calcium and phosphate to maintain our bones. So calcitrol, again, active form of vitamin D. So that is what's helping calcium get out of our digestive tract and into our bones. And then parathyroid hormone is going to act on osteoclasts. So this is reabsorption of bone, and breakdown and general maintenance. So this is also going to promote reabsorption of calcium by the kidneys because we want to hold on to calcium. It's really, really important. So our kidneys try not to excrete calcium. It wants to hang on to it because it's such an important mineral. So building bone's really important, but we also need to break down bone that's no longer beneficial to us or is severely damaged in some way. So we also need the opposite end of that spectrum. And last but not least is calcitonin. Also is going to work on osteoclasts, but is going to inhibit them. And just like a lot of these other hormones, it's stimulating calcium uptake by the bones so that it stores them for use either in bone formation or for muscle functioning. So there's a disorder of bone that I want to talk about, and that is osteoporosis. So osteo means bone, porosis means pores. So osteoporosis is porous bone. This is very, very low bone density or mass. So we don't have a lot of calcium phosphate in that hydroxyapatite present in our bones that is making them more durable. Osteoporosis can be caused by a couple different factors, either bone loss, so the osteoclasts are breaking down bone too quickly, or the other cause can be too little bone formation by the osteoblasts and osteocytes. So this is why nutrition and hormone function is so important, to keep up with that bone formation and keep ahead of the osteoclast activity. But some things can also make our osteoclasts maybe a little bit too active. So going back to the previous slide, that parathyroid hormone that stimulates osteoclast activity, if for some reason you're producing too much of that hormone, your osteoclasts are going to work too much, and that can ultimately lead to osteoporosis. Because the bone is so porous and it just doesn't have that strong density to it, it's very, very, very susceptible to fractures. So this is just an image of what normal bone looks like on the left-hand side. So it does look like there's pores in there, but that is supposed to be there. That's going to be storing things like adipose tissue. So we do need those spaces in there. But on the right-hand side, you can see just how destroyed that bone is. We are missing such a significant amount of bone. A lot of it's been broken down, again, by those osteoclasts, and it just doesn't look as dense, at least to me. So you can kind of see, even just right around in here, it's just looking not quite as dense as the bone on the right. So all of these factors that we've already talked about, like the nutrients, so this is why it's really important to get proper nutrients early on in your life and keep getting them so that you are maintaining your bone density throughout life, and you're less susceptible to osteoporosis. And hormones also, again, can affect that greatly. So sex hormones are one thing that can make a really dramatic impact, actually. So women tend to be highly susceptible to developing osteoporosis after they go through menopause, because that estrogen production drops off, and then all of a sudden you're having this decrease in osteoblast activity and production of that bone matrix. And so that sudden drop off in estrogen is going to make you very, very susceptible to developing osteoporosis. Testosterone will also decrease throughout a lifespan, but not as dramatically as an estrogen drop off would. So as people who produce testosterone get older, they are going to be a little bit more susceptible to osteoporosis. But it's, like I said, not going to be as dramatic as that sudden drop off in estrogen production. And then a lot of people have issues with thyroid hormones, so that can be the thyroxine, and the parathyroid hormone can be affected by that. So people who have thyroid issues can be at a much higher risk for developing osteoporosis as well. And then things like liver disease or kidney issues are going to impact the processing of that vitamin D, and that can also increase your risk of having osteoporosis. So there's a lot of different things that can impact your susceptibility to developing osteoporosis. But you want to make sure that you're exercising consistently to keep making that stress on your bones, which can keep up with the bone mass, and then make sure that you're eating a proper diet and getting all of the nutrients that are necessary. That way you are at a lower risk of developing osteoporosis. The risk is never zero, but you can lower that risk. That's all for today.